Hello, I'm going to try to keep these videos short and sweet and to the point, hopefully under 2, 3, 4 minutes long. So let's get started. This next conceptual question we're going to investigate is why the period of sine and cosine are 2 pi, but tangent and cotangent are just pi. So I have a unit circle drawn here with some key points we're going to investigate with, but I want to think about what an x and y axis looks like for sine, cosine, and tangent. You've got your x-axis and your y-axis. So this is going to be your input, and the input for sine, cosine, and tangent is going to be your theta, your radians value. And then your output is your y-axis. And those are going to be your coordinates from the unit circle. So for example, sine of 0 equals 0. So my input is 0 radians and my output is the coordinate 0 on the unit circle. And so you want to think about that so you know a sine graph starts at 0 and ends like this at 2 pi. So let's take a look at why that is. Let's start with cosine theta. I'm going to stop calling it x's and y's and calling it input, your theta, and your output here. We're going to plug in some key points for cosine and see what happens. I'm going to start with 0 radians. So if I plug cosine of 0 is 1. Cosine of pi over 4 is root 2 over 2. Cosine of pi over 2 is 0. And I can extend this line. Cosine of 3 pi over 4 is root 2 over 2. Negative. Cosine of pi is negative 1. Cosine of 5 pi over 4 is negative root 2 over 2. Cosine of 3 pi over 2 is going to be 0 again. Cosine of 7 pi over 4 is root 2 over 2. And cosine of 2 pi is 1. So see how this pattern all the way down doesn't repeat, but then we start back over at 1 when we get to 2 pi. So one full cycle of coordinates for cosine goes from 0 to 2 pi. And if I looked at the sine theta function also, you'll see that the same thing happens. Here's the outputs for sine at these same coordinates. Sine of 0 is 0. I'm going to skip all these pi over 4s. I'm going to jump around to pi over 2. Sine of pi over 2 is 1. Sine of pi is 0. Sine of 3 pi over 2, negative 1. Sine of 2 pi, 0. So it goes 0, 1, 0, negative 1. And then it would start over again. If I added one more coordinate, like 5 pi over 2, I would get 1 again. So this one full cycle for sine is 2 pi. Now let's take a look at tangent. I'm going to write the outputs for tangent theta. The output for tangent of 0 is y over x, so 0 over 1, which is 0. Tangent of pi over 4 is 1. Tangent of pi over 2 is 1 over 0, which is undefined. Tangent of 3 pi over 4 is negative 1. Tangent of pi is 0 over negative 1, which is 0. Tangent of 5 pi over 4 is 1. Tangent of 3 pi over 2 is negative 1 over 0, which is undefined. Tangent of 7 pi over 4 is negative 1. Tangent of 2 pi is 0 over 1, which is 0. So notice how we've got 0, 1, undefined, negative 1. 0, 1, undefined, negative 1. I repeat right here where pi is. And so that's why the period of tangent only goes to pi instead of 2 pi, because one full cycle for tangent is 0 to pi, and that's why the period of tangent is pi.